Welcome to this edition of Head to Head. I'm your host, Cam McKinney, and this is episode number 421 of the podcast. And on this episode, I'm talking about Giannis Antetokounmpo being traded to the Miami Heat. For the last 2 seasons or so, all the talk has been where and when are the Bucks going to move on from Giannis. It was a great run. The team won the NBA Finals, but has not been competitive and have made mistakes, especially when it comes to head coach. So they were forced to move on from arguably the best player in franchise history. I want to start with the perspective of Miami. I think the pairing of Giannis and Bam is interesting. These are two bigs, and that worked in the past, Tim Duncan and David Robinson, but hasn't really worked recently. The Pelicans had Anthony Davis and DeMarcus Cousins. Those two put up stats together, but won absolutely nothing. This has nothing to do with fit. This has to do with the Miami Heat being desperate for a superstar, and I can't say that I blame them given their track record. They had the big three of LeBron, D. Wade, and Chris Bosh, and then they had Jimmy Butler. They think if they're going to have a superstar, they're going to be a team that can compete to win an NBA Finals. And I sort of get that thinking, especially when you consider they have the best head coach in the NBA, in my humble opinion, Eric Spoelstra. When a big trade like this happens, people love to give their immediate reactions. There's a lot of people asking the question, does this make the Miami Heat the team to beat in the Eastern Conference? And the answer is absolutely not, but it's too early to give those kinds of opinions. We do not know how the rest of their roster is going to unfold. Their roster is obviously going to be built around Bam, Giannis. They also have Bobby Portis. The Miami Heat are going to need more shooters on the roster. They're also going to need a point guard to facilitate the ball to both of these big men. What I think is going to end up happening is early on, the Heat are going to be a way better defensive team than an offensive one. Probably by the All-Star break, they're going to find themselves offensively, but defensively, they should be good from the jump. Giannis is, of course, a former Defensive Player of the Year. What I love most about this trade for the Miami Heat are they are going to get a motivated Giannis. I mean, this is a guy who has heard the noise. He was once viewed as a top 5 player in the league. Not that many people still view him that way. And then last year, he wanted to play down the stretch, and the Milwaukee Bucks did not let him. This is a superstar player who has a lot to prove. He only has one NBA title to his name, and if he wants to cement his legacy as one of the upper all-time greats, he needs to get more. Weirdly, him and Nikola Jokic are in the exact same situation. They're viewed as great players. They've won one title each, but they're not on that top tier list because they only have won the NBA Finals once. There are obviously other critiques of Giannis's game. He's not a great three-point shooter, and I think the harshest criticism I've had of Giannis is he's not a great closer. He's not Jalen Brunson. He doesn't play his best basketball in the fourth quarter. I mean, Chris Middleton was really the closer for the Bucks when they won their championship. Giannis is not Michael Jordan. You don't give him the ball to take the final shot and everybody get out of the way. He is not viewed as one of those stars. He's a great player. He's a great statistical player. He's a guy you obviously want on your team, but in a game-winning situation, how many people actually want to see Giannis take the shot? And one could argue it's because of his style of play in the modern NBA. He's not a great three-point shooter, so you don't obviously want him to take a game-winning three. The last few minutes of a basketball game just feel awkward when Giannis is involved. For the Milwaukee Bucks, this trade has nothing to do about the players they got back. It's not about Tyler Hero. It's about those future draft picks, and they are banking on the Miami Heat turning into a bad team in a few years. And if they do, it could reinvigorate the Miami Heat the way it did the Boston Celtics with that trade with the Nets that turned into the draft picks of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. You heard of them? I fully understand them not wanting to trade for Jaylen Brown of the Boston Celtics. The Bucks are not in win now mode. They couldn't make Giannis happy. What makes you think they could please Jaylen Brown, who is very vocal when things are not going his way? I think what's getting lost in all of this, the Milwaukee Bucks did absolutely everything they could to please Giannis. They gave him max money. They surrounded him with talent. They made that ill-advised trade for Dame Lillard. Then last offseason, the team brings in Miles Turner. That made absolutely no sense. The Milwaukee Bucks are a team in need of a proper rebuild. This is a rare situation in the NBA where there really isn't a bad guy. Nobody's down on the Milwaukee Bucks for trading Giannis. This needed to happen, and nobody should view Giannis as a villain for wanting out of Milwaukee. They were not competing. They were making odd choices at head coach. I mean, Doc Rivers was never a fit. They paid him way too much money to be the head coach of the Milwaukee Bucks. That was never going to work out. Nobody thought that bringing in Doc Rivers was going to work out. The reaction to this trade that confuses me the most are the people who are saying the Miami Heat gave up way too much for Giannis. I mean, what exactly do the Heat have to lose here? They were a middling team, a play-in team. They had Bam, who's a star player, not a superstar, and they went out and they got a superstar. The NBA is still about superstars. I know some people think that because the New York Knicks won, that everything has changed, that it's about team basketball. That's all well and good, although one could argue Jalen Brunson himself is a superstar and Karl Anthony Towns is not far from a superstar. So yes, the idea of building around Giannis and Bam and worrying about everything else later makes sense to me. You need talent. That's what the Miami Heat were missing on their roster. The huge victory for me of this trade for the Heat is the fact that they did not need to involve Bam Adebayo. He was the piece I needed because it would not make sense to move on from Bam and to go to Giannis. That does not improve the Miami Heat. But because you get to keep both of them, you have the chance of growth and improvement. You have two stars on your roster. Giannis and Tyler Hero would not have gotten the job done. Giannis and Bam, there's a real possibility. Now, I do have concerns. My number one being, what are the Heat going to look like in the fourth quarter of basketball games? Is Bam going to be that closer? Because like I said earlier, Giannis is not the best version of himself in the fourth quarter of games. Now, I have all the faith in the world in Eric Spoelstra that he's going to get the job done and the Heat are going to be a viable fourth quarter team, but it's going to be interesting to see who's taking those game-winning shots. The fact of the matter is the Miami Heat did not want to go into a proper rebuild, which they would have to do if they didn't end up getting a star like Giannis. The Milwaukee Bucks wanted to be in a rebuild. The Miami Heat did not. That is the best way to describe this trade. That is what this trade is about. Two teams trying to go in opposite directions, and we're going to see how it fares out for either. Now, I do not like doing predictions right now, but I will say this. This trade should turn the Miami Heat into a top 4 seed in the Eastern Conference. I mean, have you looked at the conference lately? You have the Knicks, you know what they're going to be. The 76ers, I don't know if they're going to be that team that really beat the Boston Celtics or that team that got swept by the Knicks. The Celtics, more on them in a bit, might now be forced to move on from Jaylen Brown. The Pacers are going to be without Halliburton, at least for what I imagine to be the start of next season. When you bring in Giannis, the expectations for your basketball team should be to be a top 4 seed in the conference. I don't care what the rest of the roster looks like. You have Bam, you have Giannis, you need to to find a way to win basketball games. If by next season the Heat are still a team struggling to be a play-in team, then this trade did not work. This needs to turn them into a top 4 seed in the conference to justify making a trade like this. More than 2 decades ago, the Heat made that trade for Shaquille O'Neal, a disgruntled MVP, and he was the final piece of a championship winning team. This might not play out the same way, but expectations should be very high for the Miami Heat. You are bringing in a defensive player of the year, an MVP winner, and a guy who should be more motivated than just about anyone. So normally when a big trade like this goes down, we love to fixate on the 2 teams that were involved. But what about the team that didn't get the star? And in this case, that's the Boston Celtics. People are fascinated to see what this means for Jaylen Brown, a guy who finished 6th in MVP voting last season. There's just too many questions as to why the Celtics were involved in trying to get Giannis. I mean, the top of them is, does Jaylen Brown want to be a member of the Celtics anymore, or is this just about the Celtics wanting Giannis because they view him as a better player than Jaylen Brown? I am a fan of this team. I watch just about every game, so I can only give my opinion on the team. They just got obliterated by the 76ers, blowing a 3-1 series lead. And the biggest reason why, because Joel Embiid dominated them. The Celtics need a big man. And quite frankly, the only avenue they have of getting a halfway decent one is by trading a guy like Jaylen Brown or even possibly Derek White, although I can't imagine his value is that high. I mean, Derek White is coming off of a season where he was all NBA defensively, but offensively, he had his struggles. And maybe this is just me being irritated by all the noise surrounding them, but we are about, a decade into the pairing of Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum. I'm just quite sick of talking about both of them and how they fit together. They've won together, they've lost together brutally. I'm just over talking about them. I don't think they're that fascinating as a duo. I think people are trying to turn Tatum and Brown into Shaq and Kobe, this great all-time duo that doesn't get along. And that's great for the media. Talk about them all you want, but it doesn't do anything for the team. The Celtics have won 1 title with this duo. This would not be the breaking up of Shaq and Kobe, a team that went on a three-peat, and their last year together, they made it to the NBA Finals. We are talking about a Celtics team that blew a 3-1 series lead. It shouldn't be that big of a surprise that the team is looking into making a drastic move. The dilemma, if you want to call it one, is that Celtics fans are split on how they feel about Jaylen Brown. I feel about half of Celtics fans now view him as better than Jason Tatum, that he should be the building block of the franchise, and the other half think we need to move on from this guy. We want to see Tatum paired with somebody else. We've seen this song and dance before. Sometimes it works out, but most of the time it underdelivers. Here's what I know about the pairing of Tatum and Brown is that it really works in the regular season, that you're always going to win somewhere between 50 and 60 games, no matter how the rest of the roster looks. But does them together give you the absolute best chance of winning a title? I think now's the time to question that. Not because I care who the face of the team is. I don't care if it's Jason Tatum's team or Jaylen Brown's team. I'm going to be honest with you. I prefer Jason Tatum as a superstar. I think he's the better player. I think he rebounds better than Brown. I think he's the better passer. I think he's the guy you build around. But both of them have had their struggles, and I think both of them would probably admit they should have won more together, and I think now is the time to start questioning them as a duo. I don't care about the upcoming Jaylen Brown contract extension. I don't think that should play into this whatsoever, though it probably does. Brad Stevens, rightfully or wrongfully, is is looking at this roster and saying to himself, I should probably pair Jason Tatum with a big. Maybe he's going to be proven right. Maybe he's going to be proven wrong. But I want to see it from a basketball perspective before I give my opinion on that. Maybe Stevens is going to end up trading Brown and it's going to be an utter disaster. Can we let these things play out before we reach our verdict? And when it comes to the Jaylen Brown trade rumors, I'm just so sick of it. I mean, every year we're going to trade him for Kevin Durant. We're going to trade him for Giannis. We're going to trade him for Kawhi. It never ends up happening, yet the media loves to play this game about how disrespected he should be. And this is something that irked me this week. I mean, there was a report from Shams of ESPN that the Celtics wanted 4 first-round draft picks for Jaylen Brown, and people were like, that's not enough. Guys, you can't trade a star player in the NBA for just draft picks. To trade Jaylen Brown, the Celtics are going to have to take back players with large salaries as well. There's no world where the Celtics only end up with 4 first-round draft picks. And not to go on a side tangent about the Boston Celtics, but I think that's a larger conversation we need to have about this team. How close or far away are they from winning again? I mean, this is a team that won a 3-1 series lead against the Philadelphia 76ers of all franchises. Nobody is saying that they should be going in full rebuild mode like the Milwaukee Bucks, but is it safe to assume that they could use a soft reset? And how do you get there? By trading a guy the likes of Jaylen Brown. Last thing I'll say about Jaylen Brown, I think this is really picking up steam because there's no huge free agent this offseason. Nobody cares about LeBron James. We all know LeBron is going to end up back on the LA Lakers. There's no real story there. The biggest thing that could happen in the NBA tomorrow is Jaylen Brown being traded. That's why Shams is treating it like it's a massive deal. That's why these insiders are talking about it, because it's the only thing to talk about. There's no superstar on the market who could change the fortunes of many teams. Jaylen Brown is the biggest star available, and the only reason he's available is because insiders are the ones saying the Boston Celtics are looking to move on from him after they didn't get Giannis. Maybe after not getting Giannis, the Celtics are going to keep him for a year or two and then reevaluate their options. There's no deadline for the Celtics to trade Brown, although I do think it's incoming. It could be for quite a long while. For all of this stuff with Giannis and the Heat, for all of this stuff with the Bucks and Jaylen Brown, nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody, is in agreement about how all this played out. I mean, just everyone has their own opinions about the directions these franchises should have gone in. I mean, there are Heat fans who love the fact that they got Giannis, and then there are some who think they gave up way too much to get him. There are Bucks fans who think the Bucks should have gone all in on Jaylen Brown, although I think that makes absolutely no sense. The Bucks should not be a team with playoff expectations coming into next season, and getting Jaylen Brown creates expectations. The craziest thing about all of this is none of the talk was really about Giannis the player. I mean, we are talking about a guy who's going to make the Hall of Fame. He's an MVP. He's a Defensive Player of the Year. I think this is going to work out for the Heat. I'm not banking on them winning a title next season, but I think they're going to surprise some people, even though it should not surprise you that Giannis is very good at playing the game of basketball. Give me Eric Spoelstra as my coach. Give me Bam and give me Giannis, and I like my chances of having a good basketball team at the end of the day. I'm not saying they're going to make the Eastern Conference Finals. I'm not saying they're better than the New York Knicks. This is a team I will be watching closely, and I wasn't going to watch them closely if they had remained intact. The Heat needed to do something to become relevant once again, and this is the biggest thing they could do, bringing in a future Hall of Famer. And finally, I repeat, do not like making predictions, but I will predict this. this. Giannis has a great chance of winning MVP next season. He's got a lot to prove. The Heat need him to play at an MVP level to be competitive in the Eastern Conference. He must know that there are a lot of NBA fans who are down on him at this moment. They question what went wrong in Milwaukee. They blame him for what went wrong in Milwaukee. He needs to reestablish himself if he wants to be viewed as a top 5 player in the game, and I think he's going to do just that. I think by next season's end, we will be talking about Giannis as a top 3 player in the NBA again. Thanks for listening to this edition of Head to Head. I'm Cam McKinney, and there'll be a new episode of the podcast every week on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, so please rate, review, and subscribe.